Louis Buck Hansen ਭੇਜਿਆ ਪਾਸ ਨੀਲ ਲਕੀਰ ਤੇ ਹੈਂਸਨ ਵੀ ਹੁਣ ਬੈਂਚ ਵੱਲ ਚਲਾ ਗਿਆ ਨੈਟ ਦੇ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਲੈਪੀਏਰ ਨਿਸ਼ਾਨਾ ਮਾਰਿਆ ਪਰ ਇਹ ਐਨ ਦੂਜੇ ਪਾਸੇ ਹੀ ਚਲ ਗਈ ਪੱਕ ਐਡਲਰ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਹੁਣ ਮਾਰਿਆ ਸ਼ਾਟ ਰੋਕੀ ਪੱਕ ਰੀਬਾਰ ਤੇ ਕੱਢ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਗੋਲ ਚੱਪੇ ਫੱਟੇ ਵੈਨਕੂਵਰ ਕੈਨਕਸ
Hi, my name's Harnarayan Singh. I'm absolutely thrilled to be living my dream working as a commentator for Hockey Night in Canada. But little did I know it would be in my family's native language of Punjabi. I'm very proud that in this great country of Canada, I can live and work in a way that honors my Sikh heritage and still be a valued citizen.
I absolutely agree with my colleague Harnarayan, but it hasn't always been this way for Sikhs in Canada. My name is Belle Puri. I'm a journalist here in Vancouver. My grandfather came to Canada in 1913 in his early 20s. He left everything he knew and loved behind in India, including his wife and their 2 little girls. Like most immigrants then and even today, he came to Canada hoping for a better life and to make money to send home to support his family. At the time, India was under British rule. Rumor may have reached my grandfather, like so many others, that Canada, as a member of the British Empire, held opportunities for Indians, especially since they too were British subjects.
Hunger, actual hunger, is what is bringing my fellow countrymen here. In India, it is hard work to keep body and soul together. We see the English people received gladly and welcomed royally in India. And we suppose that we will be welcomed wherever the British flag is flying. But it seems we are mistaken.
The early part of the 20th century saw about 200,000 people a year arriving here annually, encouraged by the Canadian government. But the government was very specific in whom it targeted as immigrants. If you were British, American, or European, you were considered desirable. People who looked like my grandfather were not. Within the general public, there was resentment and fear of non-whites settling here.
Those people are undercutting the laborers that are most essential for the progress and prosperity of our country. The white workers, they are a moral and industrial menace to our Anglo-Saxon community.
At the time, everyone from India, no matter what their religion, was referred to as Hindu.
Most of the Hindus are big strapping fellows, but you can never make good Canadian citizens out of them or their descendants. Their ideas and their ways are not ours, nor can they ever be.
White Canada forever, white Canada forever, white Canada forever, our watchword be God save the King, white Canada.
Responding to pressure, the Canadian government was determined to set up a whites-only immigration policy.
That Canada should remain a white man's country is seen as not only desirable, but highly necessary on political and social grounds.
The government imposed an onerous tax on Chinese immigrants to keep their numbers down. But it had to tread carefully when it came to excluding Indians. After all, they, and especially the Sikhs, had fought for the British in several wars. And as British subjects, they should have the right to move freely anywhere within the empire. Britain was firm that Canada's policies to exclude Indians must not be on the basis of race, or at least not seem to be on the basis of race, or there could be violent repercussions against British rule in India. The government's plan was clever and devious. It was a policy called continuous journey. It meant people could only enter Canada if they traveled non-stop from their country of birth or nationality. It was specifically applied to exclude Indians because the government discouraged ocean steamers from traveling non-stop from India to Canada. It was stunningly effective. In 1907 and 1908, more than 2,600 Indian immigrants entered Canada. The following year, with the new regulation in place, only 6 Indians were allowed in. This was the political and social backdrop when on May 23, 1914, a rusting ship named the Komagata Maru steamed into Burrard Inlet. On board were 376 Indians, mostly Sikh. Try to imagine yourself as one of those passengers. You may have spent your last money to be on this ship. You had to leave your family behind because the government didn't want you to stay here for long. Exhausted from 2 long months on the open sea, sleeping on a rough bunk, crammed into a communal space, only 2 washrooms for everyone to share. Imagine your relief and joy as you finally see land. At last, you glimpse the possibility of a better life. But the ship is forced to anchor offshore. You are refused the right to disembark. Instead of a welcome, you are denied food and water in the hopes that you will leave voluntarily before being forced to do so. For 2 months, you wait, while the Khalsa Diwan Society arranges for food supplies and raises money for legal action against the government. Suddenly, you are not only an individual, but a pawn in a much bigger game.
This ship is a symbol of the honor of India, and if it is detained, there will be mutiny in the armies.
We demand equal terms with Europeans and Britishers. Nothing more, nothing less.
What we face in British Columbia and in Canada today is this: whether or not the civilization which finds its highest exemplification in the Anglo-Saxon British rule shall or shall not prevail in the Dominion of Canada.
The heroic legal efforts and onshore support from the Sikh community are to no avail. After 2 months on the doorstep of Vancouver, you are denied entry. The message is clear: you are not welcome here.
Where am I going to go? What are we going to do? We have nothing left. We know the British Indian government will not give us any assistance at all. They might arrest us and put us in jail. So why not die here instead of going back to die there?
But there are no more options for the passengers of the Komagata Maru. The anchor is lifted, and you head out to sea again to an uncertain and terrifying future. The Komagata Maru arrived in India 2 months later, and the passengers' worst fears came true. Viewed by Britain as dangerous political agitators against their rule in India, when the ship finally docked, the police tried to arrest some of the men that they saw as leaders. Shots were fired, and 20 passengers were killed. Meanwhile, Britain had just declared war on Germany, and Canada and the world soon forgot about the Komagata Maru. World War I saw more than 1.3 million Indians volunteer to fight for Britain, the largest volunteer army in the war. They died with dignity and honor alongside British and Canadian troops, despite not being welcome to live in their midst. In Canada, Indians were finally given the right to vote in 1947. But with a quota on numbers of immigrants from India, the Sikh population in Canada remained low. Nothing much changed until the 1960s, when the government opened the door to more immigrants from India. On May 23, 2008, 96 years to the day that the ship pulled into Vancouver Harbour, the government of British Columbia unanimously passed a resolution apologizing for the Komagata Maru incident.
Happily, times have changed. Unhappily, the ability to present this apology directly to the victims of the events of 1914 no longer exists. But if we could, we would say, Asi Kema de Jajak Ha, Tuhanu Ji Ayanu Kedehan. Forgive us. You are welcome. Thank you.
I'm very proud of the pioneers like my grandfather who had the courage to make sacrifices and paved the way for generations to come, so their descendants, like me, and new immigrants can live openly and freely and thrive here in Canada.